back to Introduction to Ethics. In this episode, I'm going to talk about some of the challenges for Kantian deontology. First, I'd like to talk about formulations of categorical imperative. In the previous episode, we talked about one possible formulation of categorical imperative, and that read as follows. Act only on that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. This is the only categorical imperative according to Kant. But other moral rules should also have the categorical form, without explicit or implicit conditional clause, to have moral worth. But Kant gives two other formulations of the categorical imperative and claims that they all have the same power in giving moral rules. The second formulation is sometimes called the formula of humanity, and the third formulation is sometimes called the formula of the kingdom of ends. First, I'd like to talk about the second formulation of categorical imperative, which is also called the formula of humanity. This formulation reads as follows. So act that you use humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. The main idea here is saying that we should never treat people as a mere means and always treat them also as ends. Think of examples where you treat someone as a mere means. For instance, exploitation, manipulation, etc. have such actions involved in them. You use people as if they were tools to accomplish your own goals when you get involved in such actions. For example, do I treat the cashier as a mere means in a supermarket? This might be one of the questions that we want to ask regarding this problem. Compared with the way you treat a vending machine in bad conditions, you are expected to respect the person that the clerk is. You are not supposed to ignore their working conditions. You're treating the cashier as a means, but not merely as a means. Most of the time. You treat them also as a respectable human being. Another example would be sweatshops. In sweatshops, many workers, some of them children, work under horrendous, unacceptable conditions. And most of our clothes are produced under such conditions. Ignoring the conditions of these workers would be treating them as mere means to our own ends. Part of the formula of humanity prohibits you to treat yourself as a mere means. Kant holds that you ought to refrain from behavior that's degrading to yourself. You should treat yourself as the rational, respectable being that you are. Kant gives the example of suicide. He thinks that the person who commits suicide is not treating their life as the intrinsically valuable thing that it is. Someone who commits suicide is willing to end the intolerable pain that they suffer. Kant still thinks that there is more to living a human life than having pleasure and pain. Intolerable pain does not make suicide morally right. Let's go back to some of Kant's examples. Let's try to understand Kant's examples using the second formulation of the categorical imperative. The first example that I'd like to discuss is the false promise or the lying promise. When I give a lying promise to someone, I'm trying to pursue my own goals in a way that the other person could not possibly agree to. In that sense, I'm using them as a mere means to my own ends. So giving a lying promise is against the second formulation of categorical imperative as well. This is another way of showing that lying promise is morally wrong from Kantian perspective of ethics. Or take another example that Kant himself gives, neglecting your talents. Someone who doesn't develop their talents does not take human life as seriously as they are supposed to take. They indulge in immediate self-interest, which doesn't necessarily promote human life as a value. Treating yourself always also as an end requires you to promote this value. Neglecting your talents is wrong because you are not promoting human life as a value. Take another example, refusing aid to others. Ignoring someone who needs aid is not necessarily treating them as a mere means, from Kantian perspective probably, especially when we do not have direct or indirect contact with them. But ignoring others, we are not treating them as ends either. We ought to consider how they are pursuing their own ends as well. Refusing to aid others is wrong because we are not promoting the ways these people could get control of their lives. So these were some of the examples that Kant himself was giving, and I tried to show that the second formulation of categorical imperative can be used as a tool to investigate these examples as well. There is also the third formulation of categorical imperative that Kant talks about. This formulation is also called the formula of the kingdom of ends. This formula reads as follows. act in accordance with the maxims of a member, giving universal laws for a merely possible kingdom of ends. According to Kant, each of us is one person among others, and when it comes to moral rules, each of us is both ruler and ruled. No one is in a special position from the moral point of view. Each one of us makes moral rules, but we each are also bound by them. So this is the understanding that Kant wants to explain by the third formulation. Let me talk about Kantian methodology in general. Kant offers a developed method for finding out whether an action is morally right or not. So these are the questions that we have to answer to find this out. First question, what action do you propose? Second question, what's the maxim of your action? And the third question, A, can you will that the maxim of your action should become a universal law? B, are you proposing to treat yourself or another person merely as a means and not as an end in himself or herself? And C, are you acting in accordance with the maxims of a member giving universal laws for a kingdom of ends? One of the difficulties in this method is finding appropriate maxim for an action. For example, let's assume that you want to be an engineer, but you are not sure whether this is morally permissible. What should your maxim be to put into the Kantian test? A possible maxim is, become an engineer if you want to become one. This is clearly universalizable, but it doesn't have the categorical form. Hence, it doesn't have moral worth. This doesn't mean that it's morally wrong for Kantian philosophy. This maxim is permissible, it's just not morally permissible. It may be prudentially permissible, for instance. Another maxim could be become an engineer. This is not even universalizable. You cannot will that everyone accepts this maxim as a moral law. That would leave the society without individuals occupied with their other professions. A third maxim could be pick your ideal job. This can be universalized and it has the proper categorical form. This maxim is permissible and it has moral worth. But the problem is to find out which maxim am I following when I decide to become an engineer. So this is one important challenge for Kantian deontology. Let me now talk about Kant on lying. Kant's famous or rather infamous example is as follows. A murderer comes to your door asking whether the person he wishes to kill is inside. You are hiding the person inside. But is lying to the murderer morally the right act under these circumstances? What might be your maxim if you are willing to lie? A possible maxim is lie whenever you need to. This maxim surely isn't universalizable. Hence, it's morally wrong. Another maxim could be tell a lie if your lie would save a life and the person to whom you lie doesn't have the moral right to learn the truth. It's not clear if this maxim is universalizable. It might face the contradiction problem. Let's ask if this maxim fits the second formulation of categorical imperative. Kant thinks not. He argues that you treat humanity as a mere means when you lie even to a murderer at your door. Kant says also you should not try to make calculations about consequences. What if the person decides to escape from the window and gets caught outside by the murderer? Compare Kant's verdict with that of a utilitarian. We see a clear distinction here, and I think Kant's example on lying would be a second challenge for Kantian deontology. Let me just try to summarize what I've been talking about in this episode. Kantian deontology has its particular difficulties in application. First of all, it's not always clear whether a maxim can pass the categorical imperative test. Also, difficulties of determining the true maxim of my action persists. Furthermore, the conclusions that Kant draws on lying is under suspicion. Nevertheless, Kantian deontology continues to be one of the major trends in moral philosophy, although it faces these challenges. This ends the episode for Kantian deontology.